Hello, good morning, dear students. So, today we are starting with the first chapter of our supplementary textbook, and the name of the chapter is A Triumph of Surgery. There are a number of difficult word meanings that are written over here in this chapter, and it had been marked with red words. So, just copy that meanings in the fair book while going through the video. Fine. So, let us just start with the story. Footprints Without Feet is the name of your supplementary textbook, and today we are starting with the first chapter, A Triumph of Surgery, written by James Heriot. And in this chapter, James Heriot is the name of a veterinary doctor. See, over here there are three main characters in this chapter. The first character, that is an important one, it is a Tricky, the name of the dog. The second character is Mrs. Pumphrey, the owner of the dog. And the third one is Mr. Heriot, who is a veterinary doctor over here. So let us just move with the story. So first, let me just give you an introduction about the whole chapter. ये जो स्टोरी है दैट इज़ अबाउट अ लिटिल डॉग नेम्ड ट्रिकी एंड बिकॉज ऑफ द हैबिट ऑफ ओवर ईटिंग ट्रिकी की जो हेल्थ है वो बहुत ही वीक हो गई है और ट्रिकी जो है वो पहले जैसा अच्छे से बिहेव नहीं कर रहा है. सो मिसेस पम्फ्री इज़ टोटली वरिड अबाउट द ट्रिकी. सो ही जस्ट टेक्स द ट्रिकी फॉर अ मेडिकल चेकअप टू मिस्टर हीरियट. और जैसे ही पहले वो मेडिकल चेकअप के लिए लेकर जाते थे तो मिस्टर हीरियट ने ट्रिकी को बोला था, आई मीन मिसेस पम्फ्री को बोला था दैट ट्रिकी शुड गो फॉर अ स्ट्रिक्ट डाइट बिकॉज उसकी ये जो हालत है वो सिर्फ ओवर ईटिंग की वजह से ही है, क्योंकि मिसेस पम्फ्री जो थी वो बहुत कुछ खाने के लिए ट्रिकी को दे रही थी. बट एक्चुअल में मिसेस पम्फ्री कुड नॉट कीप हर हार्ट सो हार्ड ऑन ट्रिकी कि वो किसी भी चीज़ के लिए ट्रिकी को मना नहीं कर पा रहे थे. सो शी जस्ट गेव ऑन एवरीथिंग टू ईट फॉर ट्रिकी. सो एक टाइम ऐसा आ गया कि ट्रिकी जो है वो अच्छे से ना ही बिहेव कर रहा था, ना ही वो अच्छे से खेल कूद पा रहा था, और ना ही वो अच्छे से बिहेव और चल भी पा रहा था, और उसका वेट जो था वो बहुत ही बढ़ गया था. तो स्टोरी अब यहाँ से शुरू होती है कि एक दिन जब मिसेस पम्फ्री ट्रिकी के साथ वॉक पर जाती है तो मिस्टर हीरियट सडनली अराइव्स ओवर देयर एंड मिस्टर हीरियट इज सेइंग टू मिसेस पम्फ्री कि ये ट्रिकी की हालत जो है वो ऐसी क्यों है. तो मिसेस पम्फ्री इज सेइंग दैट आई एम थिंकिंग दैट ट्रिकी इज सफरिंग फ्रॉम द प्रॉब्लम ऑफ माल न्यूट्रिशन. सो बिकॉज ऑफ दिस मिसेस पम्फ्री इज गिविंग नंबर ऑफ थिंग्स टू ईट, and instead of that she is giving the meals between food to the tricky between the two meals as well. मतलब सुबह और दोपहर के खाने के बीच में भी कुछ 11 बजे आसपास वो कुछ खाने के लिए देती है, और शाम के और दोपहर के खाने के बीच में भी अराउंड 6-7 o'clock वो कुछ खाने के लिए ट्रिकी को दे देते हैं. बट एक्चुअल में Tricky is not suffering from malnutrition, but because of the overeating, this is the condition of the Tricky. So Mr. Heriot is thinking that he should do something for the Tricky. So he is saying to Mrs. Pumphrey that you just hand over the Tricky to me as he is supposed to be hospitalized. And so Mr. Heriot is taking the Tricky to his hospital so that he will be almost safe and he will not face any kind of problem. And when Tricky is visiting the hospital, in the initial 2-3 days he could not behave like the other dogs, but as the time passes he started behaving normally. So let us just move further with the story. I was really worried about the Tricky this time. I had pulled my car when I saw him in the street with his mistress, that is the owner, and I was shocked at his appearance. So these are the words that are spoken by Mr. Heriot, and he is saying that I was worried about the Tricky this time, as he has pulled his car, and when he saw him, means Tricky, in the street with his owner, Mrs. Pumphrey, and he was totally shocked at the appearance of Tricky. He had become hugely fat, like a blotted sausage, with legs at each corner. Blotted sausage means, I should say, finely minced stuff, cylindrical cases of, I should say like hard substance, and it is divided into small equal parts of equal length by twisting it. So Mr. Heriot is saying that, like a blotted sausage, the appearance of a Tricky was such that his legs were only seen, little legs were only seen at each corner. His eyes bloodshot and stared straight ahead of his tongue lolling from his jaws. Bloodshot means आई शुड से, जैसे हम लोगों को भी कभी कभी बहुत तेज़ बुखार होता है तो हमारी आइज़ जो है वो कभी कभी रेड हो जाती है ना, दैट इज़ अ ब्लड शॉट. एंड ड्यूमी मीन्स अ वाटर टू डिस्चार्ज that is coming out from the mucous membrane, especially from the nose and eyes. So र्यूमी मीन्स जैसे कभी कभी हम बीमार हो जाते हैं, बहुत बुखार होता है या कुछ सर्दी जैसा होता है, तो कैसे हमारे नाक में से और आँख में से कभी कभी पानी निकलता है, दैट टाइप ऑफ substance that is treated as a rheumi over here. The same situation was of Tricky, and his tongue लॉर्ड मीन्स उसकी जो टंग थी, वैसे भी डॉग्स की टंग्स यूजुअली बाहर ही होती है, तो उसकी टंग्स जो थी वो भी उसके मुंह से बाहर ही रहती थी, और उसकी जो आयुष से सलाइवा जो है वो बहुत धीरे धीरे उसके मुंह में से गिर रहा था. Mrs. Pumphrey hastened to explain. He was so restless, lacking energy and enthusiasm. Mr. Heriot, he seemed to have no energy. So Mrs. Pumphrey is trying to explain her feelings to Mr. Heriot कि ट्रिकी की जो हालत थी, that was such that he was totally listless, that he was not having any kind of energy and enthusiasm in him, and it seemed like Tricky is not having any kind of energy, Mr. Heriot. So these are the words that are spoken by Mrs. Pumphrey to Mr. Heriot. I thought he must be suffering from the malnutrition, so I have been giving him some liquid extracts between the meals to build him up, some malt and cod liver oil, and a bowl of Horlicks at night to make him sleep during nothing much really. So Mrs. Pumphrey is saying that she is thinking that might be possible that Ricky would be suffering from the malnutrition, and because of that she is giving some little extracts, means she is giving some little food between the two meals as well. Between the two meals means that between breakfast and the lunch she is giving something to eat to the Tricky, and between the lunch and the dinner as well she is giving something to eat to the Tricky. And so she is thinking what kind of things that she used to give during the two meals. That is malt means ये जो है that is malt, यह वाला जो है ना, just a minute, ये वाला जो है ना, that is malt. And she is saying that malt and cod liver oil, cod liver oil is an oil which is generated from the fish, and it is having a high energy and vitamins as well. So she is saying that I am just giving this type of things to Tricky. No doubt इतना सारा हैवी फूड देने के बाद भी she is saying that बस इतना ही मैं कुछ देती हूँ, उससे ज़्यादा कुछ नहीं. And did you cut down the sweet things as I told you? So Mr. Heriot is saying to Mrs. Pumphrey कि जैसे मैंने आपको बोला था कि that you cut down the sweet things, में उसको sweets जो है वो ज़्यादा quantity में मत दो. क्या आपने वो किया? Oh, I did for a bit, but he seemed to be so weak. I had to relent. He does love ice cream, cakes and chocolate, so I can't bear to refuse him. So Mrs. Pumphrey is saying कि हाँ मैंने थोड़े दिन तो किया था, but I could not keep my heart so hard because उतना हार्श बिहेवियर जो था वो ट्रिकी के लिए अच्छा नहीं था. बिकॉज यू ऑलरेडी नो दैट ट्रिकी यूज टू लव द आइसक्रीम्स एंड द केक्स एंड द चॉकलेट. सो Mrs. Pumphrey could not bear Tricky to refuse that such type of things to him for his meal. I looked down again at the little dog. He was the trouble. That was the trouble. Tricky's only fault was greed. So again Mr. Heriot is looking to the Tricky and saying that उसकी जो greed मतलब उसका जो खाने के लिए जो कुछ भी Mrs. Pumphrey उसको देती, that was the major problem. He had never been known to refuse the food. He would tackle a meal at any hour of the day or night. And I wondered about all the things Mrs. Pumphrey hadn't mentioned. So Mr. Heriot is saying that Mrs. Pumphrey is saying that Tricky is having such a habit that he could not even refuse the food at any hour of the day. He is having that much capacity that he would just tackle the food at any hour of the day, whether it is a daytime or a night time, and he would just wonder about all the things. So Mr. Heriot is wondering about all the things that Mrs. Pumphrey has not mentioned to him. Are you giving him plenty of exercise? So Mr. Heriot is asking to Mrs. Pumphrey that, as earlier I have told you to give plenty of exercise to Tricky, are you giving that plenty of exercise to him or not? Well, he has a little walks with me, as you can see, but Hodgkin, the gardener, has been down with lumbago, so that has been running through lately. So Mrs. Pumphrey is saying that, as you can see over here, that he is just having a little walks with me, and as the gardener Hodgkin is suffering from the lumbago means a muscular pain in the lower part of the back. So he is saying that as he is suffering from the back pain, he cannot play a ring game with the Tricky. So this is the only thing that Tricky is having with me, is the only thing that he is having the exercise, not having any kind of exercise, but he is just having a little walk with me. I tried to sound severe. Now I really mean this. If you do not cut his food right now and give him more exercise, he is going to be really ill. You must harden your heart and keep him on a very strict diet. So Mr. Heriot is saying to Mrs. Pumphrey that now if you do not take care, this is a very serious matter, and if you did not take care of him, he is really going to be very ill. And so to keep him safe, you must harden your heart and you should make him to follow a strict diet. Mrs. Pumphrey wrung her hands. To wrung her hand means like this, as she is standing over you. That is to wrung her hands. Oh, I will, Mr. Heriot. I am sure that you are right, but it is so difficult, so very difficult. So she set off, head down along the road, as if determined to put a new regime into practice immediately. So when Mr. Heriot said Mrs. Pumphrey that you should keep your heart very hard and you should make it tricky to follow a very strict diet, she just wrung her hands and saying that, and as Mr. Heriot is trying to say something, she just went into house, crossing the road, as if Mr. Heriot has ordered her to follow the new prescribed diet or prescribed regime right now immediately. I watched their progress with a growing concern. So Mr. Heriot was trying to have a look on the progress of Miss Tricky, and he was tottering. So he was tottering means as Tricky was moving in a very unsteady manner, and as it was a little tweeted coat, he had a whole wardrobe of these coats. So Tricky was wearing a little coat, and when he went to the house of Mrs. Pumphrey, he observed that Tricky was having the whole wardrobe of these types of coats, that is for the cold weather, the raincoats, and for the wet days as well. He struggled on dropping in his harness. I thought I wouldn't be before I heard from Mrs. Pumphrey. So he just struggled for everything, and he is trying to bend downwards with a string, but he is thinking that it would not be very much good that if he heard this from Mrs. Pumphrey. The expected call came within the few days, and after going through the condition of the Tricky, Mr. Heriot already knew that Mrs. Pumphrey is going to call Mr. Heriot in few days. So, and as Mr. Heriot was expecting that Mrs. Pumphrey will call him, so he said that the expected call came within the few days. Mrs. Pumphrey was distraught. Distraught means extremely worried. Tricky would eat nothing, refused even his favorite dishes, and besides he had bouts of vomiting. So Mrs. Pumphrey is complaining to the Mr. Heriot that Tricky is not eating anything and he is just refusing even his favorite dishes, and he is also having the bouts of vomiting. Bouts of vomiting means vomiting after a several period of time. He spent all his time lying on a rug painting. He didn't want to go for walks, didn't want to do anything. So Mrs. Pumphrey is saying to Mr. Heriot that he is just lying on his bed, means breathing with a short, quick breaths, means he is not even able to breathe properly, and he just didn't want to go out for the walk as well, and he don't want to do anything. I had made my plans in advance. The only way was to get Tricky out of the house for a period. So Mr. Heriot is thinking in his mind that he already had a plan that what he is supposed to do after he received the call from Mrs. Pumphrey. The only thing was to get Tricky out of the house of Mrs. Pumphrey for a specific period of time. He struggled on, dropping in his harness. I thought I would be long before I had to Mrs. Pumphrey. I suggested that he should be hospitalized for a fortnight to kept under observation. So Mr. Heriot is saying to Mrs. Pumphrey that Tricky would be hospitalized for 15 days and he should be kept under the observation. The poor lady almost swooned. She was sure that he would pine and die if he did not see her every day. So Mr. Heriot already knew that Mrs. Pumphrey was having an extreme close emotions with Tricky, and he was just fainted that if he says to Mrs. Pumphrey that Tricky would be hospitalized, the Mrs. Pumphrey would be very much, I should say, shocked, and it would be very difficult for Mrs. Pumphrey to stay without Tricky for such period of time, as she is having the Tricky to have to see her every day, and even Tricky would also miss her for the longer period of time because Tricky was also having the habit to play with Mrs. Pumphrey. But I took the firm decision. Firm line means to take the firm decision. Tricky was very ill, and this was the only way to save him, in fact. So Mr. Heriot is saying that he has just taken the firm decision that Tricky was very ill, and he already knew that he wanted to save Tricky from this problem at any cost. I thought it was best way to take him without delay, and followed by Mrs. Pumphrey's wailings, I marched out of the car, carrying the little dog wrapped in a blanket. So he just reached to the residence of Mrs. Pumphrey and said to Mrs. Pumphrey that Tricky should be hospitalized for the period of 15 days. And as he had already taken the firm decision that he will just take Tricky to the hospital, he just took him to the hospital without having any delay, and he just hold the Tricky and marched out of the house, wrapping the Tricky into a blanket. The entire staff was roused, and the maids rushed in and out, bringing his day bed, his night bed, favorite cushions, toys, rubber rings, breakfast bowl, lunch bowl, supper bowl. So, when Mrs. Pumphrey came to know that Tricky has to be hospitalized for the period of 15 days, she made all the servants on the work and said that now all the things that Tricky is having, that all the things should be shifted to the hospital for 15 days, and all the maids were running in and out, bringing his day bed, his night bed, favorite cushions of Tricky, his toys, rubber rings, breakfast bowl, lunch bowl, supper bowl, etc. Realizing that his car didn't hold any stuff, he started to drive away. As I moved off, Mrs. Pumphrey was despairing, cried through an armful of little coats through the window. So when Mr. Heriot came to know that Mrs. Pumphrey is trying to give all these things to the Tricky for a hospital, and he already knew that his car is not having the capacity to hold these types of things, this quantity of things, he just moved the car further. I looked into the mirror before I turned the corner on the drive. Everybody was in tears, and just he tried to move around the corner, he just looked at Mrs. Pumphrey's house from the mirror, and he just saw that everybody was in tears. Out on the road, I glanced at the pathetic animal, gasping on the seat on my side. I patted the head, and Tricky made a great effort to wag his tail. And he was just looking at this miserable animal on the way as he was sitting by his side, and Tricky was not having that much brave capacity to wag his tail properly. Poor old lady, I said, you haven't a kick in you, but I think you have a cure for you. So Mr. Heriot is saying that poor old lady, Mrs. Pumphrey, as she is not having that much guts to follow the strict diet for Tricky, so Mr. Heriot thought that he should be very strict for him. At the surgery, the household dogs surged around me. So, at the surgery means at the hospital where the Mr. Heriot was having his veterinary hospital. The household dogs means the dogs which used to move over there, and they just dogs which used to be there in the hospital of Mr. Heriot. They just started moving, and they just all the dogs were moving around Tricky. Tricky looked down at the noisy pack with dull eyes, and when put down lay motionless on the carpet. And when Tricky was left to the hospital, he just sat down with the dull eyes, and he just laid down without having any motion, just laid down in the carpet. Thank you.